you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for joining me here today. I'm super excited to talk to you. You're one of my sort of favorite authors out there. I love books about sort of time management and maximizing life, and you have such a cool take on them. So this
Oh,
is
thank
awesome to
you.
chat. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just want to read your bio for folks who don't already know and love you. Um, Laura Vanderkam is the author of several best-selling time management and productivity books, including I Know How She Does It, What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, and 168 Hours. Her work has appeared in publications including Fast Company, Fortune, The Wall Street Journal, and USA Today. She lives outside Philadelphia with her husband and 4 children and blogs at lauravanderkam.com. Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool. So in the first little bit here, we're really just going to kind of dive into what I hope is, one of your favorite topics, just this idea of kind of productivity and, how we go about trying to sort of maximize it all without driving ourselves crazy. And I love this one quote you have that I just kind of want to kick it off with. You say, time is elastic. It stretches to accommodate what we need or want to do with it, right? And I often think of this, I think, what is it? Is it Parkinson's law or parade? One of those things that time fills to whatever. And I often think of it in relation to packing. I don't know. It always comes up when I think about when I pack my suitcase, getting ready for a trip. Because if I allow 20 minutes, it will have to be done in that time. But if I set aside 3 hours, it will literally take me 3 hours to do the exact same task. And obviously this is something that affects every area of our life. And I just love if you could just sort of tell me a little bit about more of this, what this means.
Yeah, well, there are certain activities like packing or housework or answering emails that can expand to fill any time you give it. So people are often looking for, techniques on how do I spend less time packing, or how do I spend less time on email or spend less time on housework? And they want something like, oh, well, there's this special way you can clean and it'll take less time. That's not true. The only way that it can take less time is if you choose to spend less time on it. There is no email shortcut that will guarantee you an empty inbox. You just have to decide, I'm only going to spend an hour a day on it, and then you will only spend an hour a day on it. If you allow it to, you go until you're done, it will take 24 hours a day. So there's that. But I also like to view this law in terms of people think they're busy, and so they don't have time for X, Y, or Z. And X, Y, or Z is usually something important, meaningful, enjoyable, whatever, that they would love to do in theory, but they're so busy they don't have time. And it doesn't really work like that. You can't save bits of time here and there on various activities and add it up and get to the good stuff. You have to start with the good stuff, putting in the good stuff, and then everything else will naturally take less time. And I think I saw this best on a time log from a woman who was a financial planner. She had 2 young kids. She was keeping track of a week for me. She goes out for Wednesday night, comes home and finds that her water heater has broken, and there is water all over her basement. And so on her time log, it's showing her dealing with the aftermath of this, like that night, the water, the next day, the plumbers, the day after that, the professional cleaning crew dealing with her ruined carpet. And all this takes 7 hours of her week. So basically she found an extra hour a day, right, over the course of the week. But I'm sure if you had asked her at the start of the week, like, can you find 7 hours to train for a triathlon or 7 hours to mentor 7 worthy people, she would have said what all of us would have said, which is no, I can't. I'm too busy. I have no time. But when you have to find 7 hours because there's water all over your basement, you find 7 hours. And so the key to time management is treating our priorities as the equivalent of that exploding water heater and just saying, I'm going to get to it first, and everything else will just shrink to accommodate it.
It's funny because I know Jessica Turner, who wrote The Fringe Hours, and she and I were laughing because I saw some tweet online about someone saying how I say I'm so busy and yet I just found 14 hours to binge watch the entire season of House of Cards. And it's so true. I mean, I didn't do it all in one day, but basically I did it all in one week. And it's 12 or 14 or 15 hours, whatever it is. And I was just thinking how many sort of millions of people around the world are having this experience this month.
Exactly. Or, and in fact, I tell people if they think that they have no leisure time, that they should try starting a series like House of Cards or something like that. If you've never read Harry Potter, pick up Harry Potter, and you'll be amazed where the time appears. And take note of that, right? Like take note of where that time is, because then you can use it in other times for other things that you might wish to do. It's just often that we're not aware of it because we don't have something that's so compelling that
Right.
we are willing to put it ahead of the email and the puttering and whatever else you have going on.
Right. So, okay, so go back to basics a little bit and talk to me about, I mean, because creating a time log or doing the sort of time logging process that you talk about in several of your books has been totally transformative for me. But so can
Okay.
you just give people a kind of just a, time log 101? This is what you should do to figure out
Sure.
stuff.
I think the absolute best way to spend your time better is to know how you are spending it now. And this is not about figuring out how much time we waste because we all waste time. All of us waste time. It's about making sure we're not telling ourselves stories about our lives that aren't actually true. And when it comes to time, we have all kinds of stories, whether it's that I work around the clock, so I have no time to see my family, or busy people like me just can't exercise, or I don't have any time to sleep, or whatever it is. Like we tell ourselves all these stories, and I think upon closer examination, there may be more nuance to it than we are allowing ourselves to believe.
Mm,
So what you do, I mean, the tool itself does not matter. I mean, you can use a spreadsheet, you can use like a little journal, just writing down what you're doing. You can use, there are about a million time tracking apps out there. So the tool itself is not important. It's important that you do it and that you stick with it, ideally for a week. A few days is helpful, but I think a week is the cycle of life as we live it. And just keep going, write down what you're doing as often as you remember, and afterwards look at it and say, well, what do I like about my life? What's working for me? What do I think I would like to spend more time doing? And what do I think I would like to spend less time doing?
hmm. And so when you first did this activity for you personally, many years ago, or even if you have just sort of an interesting client or something, I'm just curious about sort of some of those aha moments that come from doing this activity. Was there something you found or something that a client found that was really surprising? Because probably a lot of people think, oh, I don't need to do that because I know where I spend my time, which is
Yeah.
obviously not true.
Well, a lot of people are not even aware that there are 168 hours in a week.
Okay.
So right there, if you don't know what the denominator is, it's pretty hard to figure out what proportion of time you spend on various things. And I found that to be one of the biggest aha moments for people is that,
Mm,
you feel like I'm working 50 hours a week. That sounds like a lot. Well, 168 hours in a week. So if you're working 50 and sleeping 8 a night, which is 56 per week, that leaves 62 hours for other things. So
mm,
even if you're working more than full-time hours, there's still quite a bit of time left over,
mm,
which
mm.
people are just completely unaware of. And
Right,
then,
right.
so that's something that I've found to be a pretty big aha moment for a lot of people. Also, how much working 50 hours feels like you're working around the clock. Um,
Oh,
People are not aware of that. They assume that they're working, they'll put a large number on it, right? Let's say 80 hours, 90 hours. I work 90 hours a week. It's like, you probably don't actually. Let's keep track of it. And I've had, many people tell me like, oh yeah, I work, 60, 70 hours a week and their time log has them working 48. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it was a completely atypical week, but maybe 48 is actually a pretty big number. It is very hard to work extreme hours. But some of my favorites are people discovering that sort of these social narratives, these cultural narratives they've been telling themselves are just not the case. One of my favorites was a woman who kept track of her time for a book I wrote recently called I Know How She Does It. And she had been telling herself, I'm a working mom with a big job. Therefore, I don't spend enough time with my children, right?
hmm.
By definition,
Right,
I do
right.
not
How could I
spend enough
possibly?
time because I am a woman with a high powered job. Like everyone tells me I must not be spending enough time with my
Right, right.
yeah. And so she kept track of her time, and it was clear that she was spending every single waking minute she was not at work with her kids. And she had moved around the hours of work to a degree that she was basically home when they were getting off the bus. Like
Mm,
she was working at night after they went to bed. So she was, from the perspective of her children, she was almost like she could have been a stay-at-home mom, right? Like
mm,
she was with them so much. And she
mm,
looked at that log and she said, I used to feel guilt. I don't feel guilt anymore. Like if she wanted to go to the gym, it was okay. And so I think
mm.
that is an important insight that comes from time logging as well.
That's amazing. Just getting that sense of freedom just by seeing, hey, I am doing this. I am investing time in this, and just sort of culture makes me think I'm not, but I am. I love that.
Yeah.
So what about when you're doing time logs with people, when, doing research for your book or working with folks, do you see kind of this idea that people have that, oh, if I work for myself or if I work from home or something, I have so much more flexibility with my time than if I work in an office?
I think that certainly working from home opens up some possibilities of efficiencies that are hard to achieve if you are in an office. I mean, they're not impossible by any means, but
Mm-hmm.
most people find it very difficult to use commuting time well.
Oh,
And so getting rid of the commute can open up time for exercise or additional family time or even extra work time. I mean, honestly, the commute often takes away from work
yeah.
as much as anything else.
Huh.
There is sometimes a certain number of hours people are willing to be gone from their homes per day. And if
Right.
90 minutes of that is spent commuting, that's 90 minutes less you can work. Um, there's also just a matter of using breaks for things that you can't really use them as easily for at work, whether that's, hanging out with family members who are at the house or, again, exercising is one that can happen a lot. That said, of course, working at home is still work. And some people get themselves in trouble because they underinvest in, say, childcare
Hmm.
while they're working from home, thinking that, I don't know, you'll be able to do two things at once, which is generally not the case. Or, that, oh, I'll be able to handle more housework because I'm at home. It's like, well, either you're doing the laundry or you're working. It's really hard to do both simultaneously. So, I would caution people to remind themselves that working from home is still work. It still needs to be taken seriously and needs to
Hmm.
be taken seriously by the other people in your life as well.
I think that's really important. I always remember I had a professor, advisor in graduate school who said that she used to have women come in and say, "Oh, having a baby will be the perfect time to write my dissertation." And she would just laugh because she would say, right, because you're going to be at home with the baby, what? Or, but just this
Yeah.
idea that, right, when we think we're working from home, we think oftentimes we can do more than we can because it's really unfocused time. I mean, the reason we can't do as much is because it's so unfocused. Um, so, can you talk to me a bit about how important sort of that morning time is? One of the books you've written is What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, and it's a really interesting idea, and I think it's also really popular these days to say, oh, you've got to wake up before 5 a.m. and that sort of thing. But that's not really the concept of your book, and so I'm curious if you could just sort of share why what you do before breakfast is so important, and then what that means and what it doesn't mean, really.
Yeah. Well, I don't wake up before 5 a.m. on purpose, so it definitely is not
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
something I am advocating. I think that mornings are a great time for getting stuff done. And if you have a busy life, and particularly if your life involves reporting to an office, for instance, that morning time is often the only real chunk of time you have to devote to your personal priorities.
Hmm.
And so that makes it great for exercising or doing anything like a side business or spiritual activities. Or if you can't necessarily control what time you get home from work, it might be a great time to spend time with family before you take off from work. Because if you can't control what time you get home, you can at least control what time you leave to get there. So mornings are great for those important but not urgent things that we all think we should spend more time on.
Mm-hmm.
There's some evidence that we have more willpower and focus and discipline in the morning, that our decision-making capability gets taxed over the course of the day as we make decisions and deal with difficult people and all that sort of thing. But in the morning, it tends to be fresh. And so we have the ability to focus and bring our best selves to bear on whatever it is that we want to do. So
Hmm.
it doesn't mean you have to wake up at 5 a.m., but consciously using that time before you go to work for something other than getting ready for work, for making some progress toward your long-term goals, vastly increases the chances that you achieve some of those goals.
Hmm. And so talking about sort of that idea of doing certain things before kind of the decision fatigue of the day sets in, I guess relates to, this quote you have about rituals in the morning. So you say the best morning rituals are activities that don't have to happen, and certainly don't have to happen at a specific hour. These are activities that require internal motivation. So what are some examples of these types of morning rituals that are useful?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, exercise. There's a lot of people who do that in the morning. It's just practically easier. You only have to shower once, all
Right.
that stuff. But say you want to write a novel, right? Like, if you wait until you come home from work and have dinner,
Hmm.
like that glass of wine on the couch is going to be very appealing. And it's going to be very hard to say, oh, no, I'm going to get back and work on this thing that I don't have to work on. I just
Right.
want to work on it.
Right.
Whereas if you do it first, then it's done and you can't talk yourself out of it over the course of the day.
Hmm.
So it's things like that, the creative work, the deep thinking about long-term business problems. For some people, it's goal setting or meditating or things like that.
Awesome. So now I want to talk a little bit sort of about this idea of kind of self-care and rejuvenation, I guess. So one of your books is all about how we can best use our weekends, and you say something in it. You say you need to hit Monday ready to go. To do that, you need weekends that rejuvenate you rather than exhaust you or disappoint you. Cross training makes you a better athlete, and likewise, exercise, volunteer work, and spiritual activities make you a better worker. And I think this really gets back to that idea of, people saying they work 80 hours a week. Well, that means they must be working, one of those full weekend days. But you're really saying, no, we need that weekend time to not be working, or at least to be doing something else as well. Can you kind of
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Well, I certainly don't say don't work on the weekends. For many people, it's just reality. It's also, I think, in some cases, a a good way to work longer hours while maintaining some open space during the week. And so, particularly as I've studied women with children, I found that many were willing to say work 5 hours on the weekend in order to get off an hour earlier every day
Mm,
during the week. Like that's a trade off they're willing to make. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. I think that you do want to be careful about creating open space on the weekends, like enough
mm,
open space that work isn't sort of bleeding into everything else. So
mm,
what some people might do is get up early on Saturday morning and do like 3 hours of work then, and maybe 2 hours on Sunday night before the week starts. So you still have most of the weekend open.
mm.
That time from Saturday noonish to Sunday night is still open for not work and for sort of clearing the brain, but you've been able to do that work that you needed to do on the weekend. So, but that said, I think that weekends we need breaks in general. Like the human brain cannot function in perpetuity.
Right.
And we can see this during the day. Like if you do keep track of your time, you'll see that often about mid-afternoon, you sort of start hitting refresh on the inbox a lot, flitting back and forth between different things. And that's your brain taking a break. And if you don't give it a real one, it'll take a fake one that involves like surfing the web randomly and
Mm,
not being on social media and all that. And so it's far better to give it a real one. Like just get outside, go for a walk, talk to a friend, whatever it is. It's the same thing with weekends. Weekends are a longer version of this. And we often make this mistake with weekends of thinking, oh, it's a great time to get caught up on chores. Or it's all about the kids. Like we have a weekend full of children's sporting activities. There's no time for anything else. And the problem is, though, that both of those things can leave you either exhausted, feeling like you didn't really get a weekend, and then bang, you hit Monday, you've got to have that energy to go, and you don't have it. Or else you feel sort of disappointed if you don't do anything that was fun. Like you're trying to tell people, what did I do all weekend? I don't know. I didn't do anything, but
right.
it wasn't anything that made me feel like, life is good. I was daydreaming on, lying in the sun, blissfully watching the clouds. It wasn't that. It was like just, surfing the web, watching TV you didn't mean to watch, cleaning the house half-heartedly. That sort of nothing doesn't feel very good come Monday morning. So think about planning in, just maybe 3 things that will add to your energy levels. Maybe that's going for a long run. If you're a runner, for instance, it might be going out to dinner with your partner. It might be meeting a friend for coffee. Those 3 things won't take that much time of
Mm,
your weekend, but having those 3 things happen will vastly increase the chances that you hit Monday feeling like I feel restored. I feel like this was a weekend that added to my energy levels rather than subtracting from it.
hmm, hmm. And so So you are, so you're someone with, you've got four kids running around, so your weekends are probably super busy. You've got lots of those sporting events, that kind of thing. So how do you go about finding these sort of pockets of time that you can do for restorative things? Do you plan your weekends well ahead of time?
I do, and some people hate that idea, and I get that. If I'm in the Myers Briggs taxonomy,
Sure.
I'm a total planner, total
Sure.
J, whatever it
Sure.
is.
Sure.
Uh, and I get that some people hate the idea of planning leisure time.
Right.
So you don't have to plan every minute. I am not saying plan every minute like of your weekend as if your weekday in 15-minute slots on Outlook. You do not have to do that. But having a rough idea of what you would like to do, like what would make you feel happy and when roughly that could happen. And if you need any logistical support, like if you need to trade off with your partner or hire a sitter or, make a reservation or whatever it is, that you do that enough ahead of time so that it happens.
Hmm.
So yeah, I have my kids' soccer and baseball games on the calendar. I can look ahead to the weekend and see, oh, well, we have this. I'm giving a speech this weekend, this Saturday. We've got a baseball game during the same time, like probably, talk about it with my husband so he knows to hire a sitter so he's not mad when he just suddenly discovers he has to bring three
Right.
small children to somebody else's baseball game. But I look at it and then I say, okay, well, this time is open. Maybe Sunday morning is open. Look at the weather. That could be a time I could go for a run.
Uh-huh.
And if my husband's going to want to run, maybe he goes in the later afternoon or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
But we work it out and then figure out. Well, we also have an event Friday night, so that'll be fun for us. Yeah, you just look at it, make sure that there's enough stuff that's fun for you that it just doesn't feel like you're cleaning the house and shuttling children around all weekend.
I mean, I love that idea, and I love also just obviously not just doing it on the weekends, but making sort of time in your regular work life for that to happen also. And I don't remember which book it's in, but you tell the story of some sort of high-powered executive who basically is able to go on these like extensive hikes in some forest near her house on a fairly regular basis. And I just remember thinking what an awesome sort of story that was, because here's a woman that probably the world thinks works 80 hours a week, and yet she feels like she has time to do this.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, it's time is a choice. And what that woman had said to me was, rather than say, I don't have time to do X, Y, or Z, she'd say, I don't do X, Y, or Z because it's not a priority. And if that's true, it is true. And we should own that and acknowledge that. But if it is a priority, you have the power to make it happen. And so in this particular case, she, feels like she wants the kind of life where if it's a beautiful spring day and she wants to go for a hike, she will go for a hike and she will make that happen. And I think more of us have the ability to do that than we probably give ourselves credit for.
I would absolutely agree with that. I'm wondering, just in the last few minutes here, if you're talking to someone and they say, I am absolutely overwhelmed, I don't know where to start. They say, I work 80 hours a week, or I don't have time to sit down, or I don't have, I could never read a book, or they do sort of that classic, just sort of expelling of all their busyness and sort of maybe as a defensive way to say they can't do anything else or can't add in any time for sort of
Mhm.
self-care. What is the first thing you say to someone who's kind of feeling at that place of overwhelm?
Well, I mean, I think we have to be careful not to make ourselves victims in all this. I mean,
Hmm.
because we are smart people in a rich country. Like, if you are telling me that from a refugee camp somewhere, I'll be inclined to believe you. But if you are in, somewhere with a Skype connection, like the
Hmm.
ability to, email me about it. Like, no,
Huh.
you are in far more position of power here that you have the ability to do something about your life. And if you want to wallow in your misery, that is fine. Personally, I am not a big fan of the Misery Olympics because I feel like no one wins in the Misery
Yeah,
Olympics.
that's true.
So it's better to take yourself out of the running and say, well, if I am unhappy with my life, what can I do to change it? And often there is something that can be done.
Hmm.
Like if you have a horrible job, you don't have to stay in a horrible job. There are lots of jobs out there, and maybe you have various financial responsibilities that makes it feel like you can't do anything, but you could probably work on getting control of that. And so there's all sorts of things you can do. I do find it funny though. I've had conversations with companies that are maybe known for extremely long hours, and they've talked about bringing me in to talk about, managing their time. And I'm always like, well, I would love to have some of these people keep track of their time for me. I'd love to see their 90-hour work weeks, and we can talk about how they can deal with their 90-hour work weeks. They're like, oh, our people are too busy to keep track of their time. I'm like, but how do you know they're working 90 hours a week then?
Wow.
Like, I refuse to accept this as like the starting point of this discussion that everyone is working 90 hours a week. It's like, show me it and then I will deal with it. If you show it to me, then I will doubt it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, right, how many of those hours are actually doing work and how many they're just sort of like transitioning between things or chatting with colleagues or whatever it may be is a whole other discussion. Huh. Okay. Where this is great. I love this kind of talk. Where can folks find you?
Well, I blog most days over at my website, lauravanderkam.com, and I would love to connect with your listeners and viewers there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I think I didn't finish that sentence.